So Vincent van Gogh is, one of my favorite artists of all time. Okay, so maybe not. Actually, it is. Okay, so Vincent van Gogh is my favorite painter of all time. I'm usually very unbiased when people ask me about your favorite artist, your favorite music, and sometimes there is a musician that will play some very good music, and then sometimes not. But I'm very open. But Vincent van Gogh is one of my not the, but one of my favorite painters of all. Actually, I mean, hands down it is. Okay, I love Vincent van Gogh. I like him a lot. Okay. And the reason I like him a lot is because I know a lot about him because when I was in middle school in Shotwell, one of the very first art movies that I saw was a movie that's called Lust for Life. And so my art teacher by the name of Miss Taylor at the time, but now her name is Mary DeChambre, she was one of the very first teachers that kind of made me like art and push my abilities a little bit further. And so when I watched the movie Lust for Life, I just liked Vincent van Gogh. I had seen his Starry Night, but that movie kind of made me open up my eyes even more. And so when I got into teaching in middle school, I followed the same thing. I found the movie and I played it for my students. But having a school where you have 7 periods every single day, and then it's per semester, I've seen that movie 14 times a year. Every year for the next 6 years, that I would know that movie by memory, that I would basically mouth off the dialogue, and it got to the point where I just can't watch it anymore. But I would still like to share it with some of you, with some of the students, but I don't want to see it in class because I don't want to see it again like 8 times a year. I love the movie, but you can only watch a movie so much. But the reason we know a lot about Vincent van Gogh is because we know so much because he wrote letters, and those letters were published into a book. And so in this video, what I'm going to be talking about would be I'm just going to give you like a brief, maybe not detailed, about his life and why I think Vincent van Gogh is one of my favorite painters of all time. Okay, so in order to understand Vincent van Gogh, you have to understand how art was considered at the time. And so art at the time had several guidelines because of the Academy of Fine Arts that was established in France. And so in order to be considered art, it had to have some themes. That would be literature. They would have to be historical. It had to do with mythology. It will have to do with religion, mythology, literature, portraits of the rich and famous, and I guess some sort of a fantasy land, some beautiful landscape. And so it had to have those themes. And if it didn't have that theme, then it's garbage. And so the Academy of Fine Arts, they train their artists to make these paintings, and then at the end of the year, think of it as the end of the school year, they would have this exhibition that was known as the Salon. And so in the Salon, people, their art will get critiqued, they will get criticized, or they will get good reviews. And so that was the aim for most of these students. But there's more to that, there's more to that, but I kind of want to leave that for another time because I am kind of thinking of giving you guys a retrospective of art history throughout the times. But I don't want to get too much into that. But let's go with Vincent van Gogh and what was his influence. So Vincent van Gogh was influenced by a group of artists that are known as the Impressionists. And the Impressionists were influenced by 2 things, photography and Japanese artwork. The Impressionists were influenced by photography because they saw photography as a threat. It was a brand new art form, and they felt that it was going to take over painting. And so they thought, or they had the idea to paint everyday sceneries and make that as a painting. Make a painting similar as if you were looking through a camera. And so so that was one thing. They didn't want to lose painting as a major art form. And the other thing was the Japanese artwork, such as the Great Wave. The Great Wave, I'm sure you've seen it before, but there were artists such as Hokusai and Hiroshige that made these Japanese woodblock prints, and they depicted everyday life. A farmer or a fisherman or or someone in the marketplace. And like I said, it covered everyday life just like photography would capture everyday life. And so they felt that they want to make artwork using those 2 influences and make the Impressionist artwork. And in order to kind of stand out, they kind of wanted to break away from whatever the Academy taught them, from painting smooth and realistic. They went from like very, very thick applications of paint, and they were called like having their artwork being loaded on a revolver and then just shot on canvas because the paints are just very rough and it looks incomplete and it looks very primitive. But they were very influential. Gogh came in after the Impressionist movement had died out. And so Vincent van Gogh will be placed in something that's called the post-Impressionist movement. The only difference is that it's after the Impressionists, and so Vincent van Gogh and others just kind of tried to bring it back up, which in a way kind of worked, but different art styles usually come and go. But a little bit about Vincent van Gogh. So Vincent van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853, and his father was Theodorus van Gogh, and he was a minister, so his family was highly religious. And so the thing about Vincent van Gogh is that one of his first jobs was to become a preacher also. And so based on a book that was based on the letters of Vincent van Gogh, that Vincent van Gogh was, after he was ordained into the ministry, Vincent van Gogh went to work and preach and become a minister for a small mining town. And so back then, power was provided, power is still provided by coal. And so there was a coal mine. And so Vincent van Gogh earned the respect of the people because when Vincent went to preach there, they didn't listen to him. And so he saw how they lived, how they worked, and so Vincent saw that, well, hey, if the church is giving me all this money and all these clothes, I want to give it to them. And so the church gave Vincent van Gogh a house, clothing, money, and food, but Vincent gave it to the people, which of course earned the trust of the people that they listened to him because he was actually being one of them. Vincent went as far as to work in the mine. But again, that is basically based on the book by Irving Stone. Whether it's factual or not, I'm going to have to read more of the letters. But the church actually came in and they saw how Vincent lived. They saw that he was sleeping in a shack and there was a bed made out of hay and he was dressed in rags. And so Vincent van Gogh basically was discharged from the church because he didn't follow the policies that the church has given him. Vincent van Gogh went back to live with his parents. And so in one dinner, he came across a cousin by the name of Kay. And so cousin Kay is not really his cousin by blood, but is actually a cousin by marriage to one of his relatives. And so that was one of Vincent's heartbreaks because Vincent van Gogh declared his love to her because, basically the husband passed away, she was single, and so he kind of saw it as a way to kind of start a life with this woman, but she rejected him. And so Vincent van Gogh went to her house and he was talking to the parents, and so the parents were just telling him to just go, she doesn't want to see you, understand things, she doesn't want to see you. And so there's a thing where it says that he put his hand on the fire of a candle and he says that, let me speak with her and I will wait here as long as this candle is still lighting up my hand. And so it just shows that he is a little bit unstable mentally, but he was very passionate though. And so eventually his hand, they just told him to stop and they tended his wound and he went away. And so that was one of his first heartbreaks. And so he went to live with his brother Theo. So his family they don't really want to do anything with him. They were embarrassed of him. For example, his sister, when Vincent van Gogh was taking up sketching, Vincent would go out on location. If he would see a barn house, he would just dress on some sort of a wood, like a very shaggy vest and clothes, and he just looked very unkempt, and he would go and sketch. And the townspeople know who he is, and they would kind of talk about him for being how weird he is. And so his sister would kind of tell him to, can you go away? I'm having some friends coming over. So they're embarrassed of Vincent van Gogh. And his father just kind of saw him as a failure because he couldn't keep his job in the ministry. But Theo van Gogh, which is Vincent's younger brother, was very successful. He was an art dealer. And so knowing how Vincent, has a very big passion for art, he basically invited him to France. Vincent van Gogh was self-taught, but at the same time, he did have a cousin by the name of Anton Mauve, who was a very reputable realist painter. And so Anton Mauve kind of, gave him some cast models, gave him some supplies. But again, according to the book by Irving Stone, it just felt that cousin Mauve just gave him all of this stuff. Here, take these canvases, take these paints, take this, and take that, just to kind of keep him busy. Whether he actually taught Vincent or not is, I really don't know, but it just kind of seems that cousin Mauve just gave him a lot of things. Here, take some money, buy some supplies, practice, just to keep him busy. But they did argue a lot about the artwork. Anton Mauve was a very realist painter, whereas Vincent applied thick applications of paint. And so their ideas just kind of diverted that, Mauve just didn't want to see him anymore. how Vincent painted, wanted to introduce him to these impressionist artists and kind of share some ideas, have them network. And so Theo genuinely cared for Vincent van Gogh. And so he invited him to France and introduced him to all these people. And it was going pretty good for Vincent. It was going pretty good. And so Vincent lived with his brother, and he painted in there. But of course, with the large number of paintings that Vincent produced, it was just so much that it became kind of cluttered, and he tried to sell his artwork. And Theo genuinely believed that Vincent van Gogh was a really good artist, and he would try to sell Vincent's work as much as possible, but to no avail. That the actual firm that Theo was working at was kind of telling him to stop selling Vincent's work. It's driving our customers away. But Theo insisted that his work, it could be great, but it could be more. And so he really genuinely believed in Vincent van Gogh. And so seeing that Vincent felt that he was being a burden to his brother, that he decided to leave and travel some more. And that's where he traveled to the house, the Yellow House in Arles. And so the Yellow House of Arles was a house that he intended to kind of have it as a colony. And so Vincent moved there in 1888. And at the insistence of Theo van Gogh wanted to have Paul Gauguin to live there. But of course, just like before with other people, that their ideas when it comes to art clashed a lot. And so in one argument, this is what came for the incident about the him cutting off his ear. So a lot of you guys know that Vincent van Gogh cut off his ear. And so they had an argument, and in that argument, Paul Gauguin just stormed out of the place, and he was going to pick up his stuff the next morning. That Vincent van Gogh just kind of chased him with a razor knife, and he kind of like looked and thought about what he was doing, went back to his place, that he actually just cut off his entire ear, that he gave his ear to a woman, says to like, guard this, take care of it for me, please. And then he got sent to the hospital in 1888. And so while he was staying in an asylum in St. Remy in 1889, that's when he made the famous painting, The Starry Night. And so he did two versions of The Starry Night, but of course the one that you guys are very familiar with is this one. And so he painted that while he was under an asylum care. So after the asylum, while he was in the asylum, he did more paintings of the doctors that were taking care of him, to make sure that he's healthy and all that. And so after his discharge from the asylum, he went to live back with Theo van Gogh in Paris, France. And I was there where Theo gave him the news that your painting, The Red Vineyard, was sold by for 450 francs. That is the only painting that he did. And so again, Vincent van Gogh decided to live on his own. And so finally, like in 1890, that's where he made his. Supposedly, his last painting was the wheat field with crows, and on the top there will be some blacks in there that would kind of represent his frustration, because Vincent van Gogh is known for applying very, very strong and vibrant, bright colors, but in this one he just put black at the top of the sky, and which of course represents the crows. And supposedly that was his last painting, and of course some people say that it was another one. But here's the thing that becomes debatable about Vincent van Gogh. So there are rumors that Vincent van Gogh either one self-inflicted and committed suicide, but the wound was not very severe, that it took him days and he was in agonizing pain, or the second one was that he was shot by a couple of kids, and that he did reported it because he was already intending to die. And so Vincent van Gogh went back about his own business, went back to his hotel room, and just locked himself in the room. And he was only discovered because usually the person or the innkeeper knows Vincent van Gogh's schedule, where he usually comes down for dinner at a certain time. But since he never came down, they went to check up on his room, and they heard like him moaning in agonizing pain. And there is where they found Vincent van Gogh, and they brought him to a doctor. And eventually, in a few days later, Vincent van Gogh passed away, sadly. And so 10 months later, Theo van Gogh also declined in health because he was actually heartbroken at his brother's death. Theo van Gogh was the only relative that actually cared for Vincent and genuinely believed in Vincent van Gogh. And he was so heartbroken that he probably felt that he didn't do enough for his brother, that 10 months later he passed away. And so Theo Van Gogh's wife, by the name of Joanna, kept all of the letters, all the letters that were kept. I'm not sure if she actually retrieved the letters from other people, but she kept all the letters. That eventually, every single letter that was collected, possible, has been put into a book that is called The Letters of Vincent Van Gogh. And so that to me is like a very amazing thing, because some of the things that Vincent Van Gogh says is very, very beautiful. So for example, like one of my favorite quotes of Vincent Van Gogh, that I find it to be very, very inspirational. So one of my favorite quotes from Vincent Van Gogh is, it is good to love many things, for therein lies true strength. And whoever loves much performs much and can accomplish much, and what is done in love is well done. And so I really like that quote, because I mean, for me, being like, I am an empathetic person, and so when I teach, I try to teach it with as much care as possible, because I genuinely care for every one of my students, and even you guys that are far away and I may never even see here physically in the classroom, but I genuinely care for every single one of you guys. And I see that quote, and my job as a teacher, I do it with much love and empathy. And even though I may not be physically there with you guys, or you guys physically here, I just want you to know that I genuinely care for all of you guys. I really do. And so that is what I would like to share about Vincent Van Gogh. So he is one of my favorite artists of all time, possibly just the favorite artist of all time. And so I just kind of hope that, this video will kind of give you like a more of an eye-opening thing. Maybe you learned something different, or maybe through the discussions that kind of served as an eye-opener. And maybe you were able to see Vincent Van Gogh in a different way. And even though the majority of you guys say like he's the greatest painter of all time and da 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 da, but did you knew that part of his life? But other than that, I hope that this was helpful. I will be making more videos like this. So in the comments below, just kind of, if you were to know Vincent Van Gogh in person, what kind of person would you be? Would you be the sympathetic person or the empathetic person that would be there to help him? Or would you be the person that would be like, whoa, you're crazy and I just don't want to get involved with you. It's too much drama. So be honest, okay? There is no right or wrong answer. So I would like to see your thoughts about, what kind of person would you be if you lived in Vincent Van Gogh's timeline or time period. Timeline sounds like an alternate reality. But anyways, you guys have a wonderful day and take care of yourselves.